one of the great joys of coming over to Tim's is that there is always something on the television when I walk in. In this case, it's Under Fire.
Yes.
Which Roger Spottiswoode, which you forget what Under Fire is like, and here I am looking at Joanna Cassidy and Nick Nolte and Jean-Louis Trintignant. I forgot that he was even in
the movie. Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Yesterday, Jackie Bissett and Nick Nolte.
Yeah.
Lugosi Jr.
The Deep.
Yeah. Which was I had forgotten what that movie was about. I had forgotten it was really about those ampules of morphine. They were all about that morphine down there. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I forgot about that. Because, they were looking for gold or treasure.
Yeah. Well, that was in that moment when, after Jaws had succeeded, everyone thought, Peter Benchley, what else does he have?
Yeah.
Because they thought that the reason Jaws succeeded was because of Peter Benchley.
Yeah, not the...
Which is the same delusion they had after The Godfather, where they thought, oh, this Mario Puzo, he's got a thing. No. These are bad novelists.
Yeah, they were fixed by better filmmakers.
That's it. These are bad novelists who wrote bad novels that just simply had a germ of something in them that a filmmaker could turn into gold.
Yeah. Take the pulp out of it.
That's it.
Stuff. Yeah.
Well, I should say I'm very happy because the Women's World Cup turned out could not have turned out better for me. I will say this: I wish the American women this time out had a little bit less swagger. They certainly deserve to have it. A back-to-back World Cups is nothing to slouch at. There was a little bit too much cockiness in them for me this year. But I'm thrilled they won.
Yeah, thrilled they won. You know what? Swag if you want to. But here's the thing: if you hadn't engaged in so much swag, then you and I wouldn't be talking about that right now. We'd be talking about what badass. We'd only be talking about that.
That's probably true.
And there wouldn't be even a droplet of that. Besides that, particularly on the two in a row, now you should kind of be acting like you've been here.
Yeah.
You just be cool.
Which is what Charles Barkley always said to the rookies. Don't celebrate after a dunk. Yeah. Act like you've been there.
Act like you've been here. I'm sorry. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, I am too. I think Walter Payton used to say something similar about scoring touchdowns. Payton was never like an end zone celebration guy. I catch it, I score my touchdown, go back.
Yeah,
it's my job.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that certainly thrills me. I was elated that they wound up in the final against the Dutch women. I have three favorite teams in men's and women's. U.S., France, Netherlands, in that order. So it breaks my heart that the U.S. had to win the championship by beating France and the Netherlands and England, because I love all those teams. But you know what? I think all those teams performed well. I think they're going to get more investment in their programs, and I think this World Cup really is going to change FIFA. Despite all the equal pay discussion, which most people don't seem to understand, there are really interesting nuances to it. But I think FIFA is going to cut loose some checks and help develop the women's game in South America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in places where the countries haven't really invested significantly in it. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah,
so
for me, it's kind of a simple thing, and I understand what people talk about. You have to look at box office receipts and tennis. Tennis is my favorite sport. They're 3 sets opposed to 5. All this kind of stuff. But here's the thing. And this is true between soccer, men's soccer, women's soccer. I'm sorry, women's soccer is a far and away more entertaining game.
Much more
entertaining sport than men's soccer. Same thing.
Because they don't fake it.
Yeah, it's a strategic game. It's a tactical game, but it still has strength and speed.
Yep.
Same thing in women's tennis, a far and away more interesting sport than men's tennis. Men's tennis is how hard can I hit it? How hard can you hit it back?
Yeah.
That's pretty much all they're doing on the men's side of the game.
I'm sorry. One of the most entertaining, it might even be the most entertaining. I mean, apart from the legendary Borg-McEnroe finale at the U.S. Open way back, otherwise, there was was it a Wimbledon final? It was the Wimbledon final between Serena and our Russian girl.
The Russian girl, the beautiful.
Yes. Why can't I think of her name?
Anyway, Sharapova, Maria Sharapova.
There was a Maria.
I haven't seen her in a while.
Well, because she's been off the grid because they unfairly banned her for a year or whatever. But Maria and Serena had a final that was one of the most phenomenal things I've ever seen. It was like it would these rallies of like 20 and 30 strokes, kissing the corners, and just running and running and running, and it was amazing. It was really a breathtaking thing to watch.
Well, Serena, speaking of her, will be as we tape this. She has made another final. And she will play against Simona Halep. And it's really sort of funny because this run. No one's been talking about Serena.
I know.
For one thing, we were all this kid named Coco Gauff, this American kid named Coco.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing.
15.
15 looks exactly like Venus when Venus was 15. Which is really and took Venus out in that first round, of course. But so we've been talking about her and a few other people. So Serena has been very able to very stealthily work her way through to another final while playing doubles with Andy Murray.
Crazy, right?
I just love it. I know
it's crazy.
It's fantastic stuff. All right, now the sports report is over. Let's talk about movies.
Getting into the movies, and so one thing that we should probably talk, because this was interesting. I listened to you on Film Week last week when you gave me credit for being an editor, which was hilarious because I've always thought I was a terrible editor. But you talked about the new Spider-Man and Mary Jane and Zendaya's Mary Jane. And Zendaya's great, but should not play Mary Jane.
No, Mary Jane's a little redhead, and there's a reason she's a little redhead. And by the way, in that animated Spider-Man, in your different Spider-Verse, so you got another Spider Miles, and there are Peter Parkers.
So here's the question.
Parkers have Mary Janes, and they're all redheads. So that
on that subject, there's another bit of casting which is interesting because Zendaya last year, for a moment, was talked about as the lead in the Little Mermaid live action. Wound up not being her. Winds up being Halle Bailey. From the Disney Channel, who is a singer, who's kind of an acolyte of Beyonce, and from the Chloe x Halle duo with her sister. So that's kind of turned up a thing. People are like, wait a minute, Ariel's a redhead white girl, and you just cast a black girl as Ariel. How's that working? There's a whole hashtag not my Ariel emerging, which is in it, and a lot of people are jumping all over that, saying you're being really, really unfair and so forth. Now, your thoughts about that? I'm curious.
That one I have no trouble with.
Okay.
And there's a reason why I have no trouble with that one. But if I had my druthers, what you would have done is given the character a different name. And then let her exist in the world of the Little Mermaid people. And there's another Ariel, and she's over there, and she's in the. To me, I do not like the idea of these things usurping one thing for the other, just sort of arbitrarily. Now, but I'm going to live with that one, and I'll tell you why. But as opposed to, sometimes we talk about the Bonds. I mean, they talk about the James Bonds for a while. They talked about Idris Elba. And no, James Bond is not a brother. He just isn't. And by the way, Shaft is not a white dude. And the reason why we shouldn't do these things for the exact same reasons,
See, now here's where I came in on this, and I mentioned this on our Facebook page. And the problem here is because there is an animated thing that exists in the world, and then a live action version of it that people have expectations about. Now, Disney has played fast and loose, and they've been faithful and not so faithful with some of these to varying degrees, as we talked about with Dumbo, right? The live-action Dumbo's got no mouse. It's got a dad and some kids that were not in the animated. Like, that's all switched up. It's a completely different story. The only thing that is it has an elephant with floppy ears that flies. That's about the only thing in it that's the same. Beauty and the Beast was 100% faithful.
Almost faithful to
a fault.
And
then Cinderella's got no mice in it. There's no bibbity bobbity boo. There's none of that. Like Cinderella, the brand of live action Cinderella takes a lot of liberties and changes the story a little bit too. So the question is, how far afield are they intending to go with this Little Mermaid? We don't really know yet. We know the music will be there. I'm not even sure the live-action Milan has the music in it. Do you know?
No,
do you know if they're doing it as a musical or straight?
In my mind, they're doing it straight.
So no music.
So no music.
That's an interesting switch up.
Yeah.
So
and the Chinese are still pissy about it. So
there was a Michelle Yeoh Milan that they had some years ago that didn't do well, and I think they're upset that their version didn't do anyway. But the thing that I found interesting is this, and this is because I have a daughter who loves Ariel. That was her first movie, her first princess, and my daughter has red hair. Not that red, but it's red hair. And she's very aware of it, and she's very proud of her red hair. And the reason she gravitated to Ariel was because Ariel had red hair just like her. And I've read a lot of people, the issue with casting Halle Bailey is not that they've cast a black actress. It's that Ariel needs to have red hair.
Red hair, yeah.
Because gingers catch such flack in the world. And we are the butt of everybody's joke, and we're this and we're that, and you get.
So to erase them is diminishing.
They felt like Ariel's hair mattered.
Yeah.
Like in the animated film, it mattered, and and they were waiting for a live action Ariel to be a live action redhead, and that's a disappointment to them. And I think that's really interesting. Now, I had not thought of that.
So I was called on the carpet about my Zendaya thing, and some kid said to me exactly that. What if Zendaya in that live action version of Mary Jane had red hair? In other words, she just had dyed red hair.
Yeah.
If on screen that's still Zendaya, but her hair's red because people do that with their hair. I'm sitting on I'm kind of blondie right now. And would you still be upset because you said it was because Mary Jane was a little redhead? I specifically said that. I didn't say that because Mary Jane was white. I didn't say
a redhead.
That. I said she was a redhead, and there's even a reason why she's a redhead. And so I had to take a beat, and think to myself, it really is the hair. That I'm having the issue with. And that's the reason why I was going to say okay for the Little Mermaid, because I was going to say my suggestion is that's actually the thing, guys. The coconut shells too are an issue, but the red hair. So if it's a little black girl, a Latina girl, whatever, and you give them the crucial feature. Of the character, I think I can live with that.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I guarantee you that my daughter, when she sees the Little Mermaid live action, they will have absolutely no problem with it. She'll be like, "Oh, well, that's an interesting take on it." I probably prefer the animated. That's how she feels about Beauty and the Beast. She saw the live action. She enjoyed it. She watched it a few times on Blu-ray. She's gone back to the animated. Right.
But that is the crucial take. Just make the kids red hair, make the kids hair, and then I think we'll be okay.
The bottom line too is that the one does not make the other one cease to exist.
Exactly.
And I have a bigger problem with the director they chose for the Little Mermaid, but and I have a bigger problem too with the way that Disney is revising some of their movies.
There's some revision in Mulan, some of which is necessary.
Well, not even that. The fact that we should let people know now that if you have an older edition, an older Blu-ray of Toy Story 2, hang on to it, because the version that Disney just recently released
of the same film,
they secretly scrubbed part of the outtakes over the credits. There used to be an outtake over the end credits where the character that Frasier, Kelsey Grammer voices is having a conversation with two Barbies. And it felt very Me Too.
Okay.
They took it out.
Okay.
It's part of the original film. That ain't cool. That ain't cool.
Yeah, it's a thing we're gonna have to deal with, though. I mean, I understand some of Eddie Murphy's stuff is gonna go away in that movie.
You gotta leave that stuff as is. You gotta own it. It's part of history. You can't sanitize these things. Well, anyway, we're gonna get into the DVDs and Blu-rays now. We have rambled enough. We hope everybody had a good holiday here in the U.S. Everybody overseas, hoping that you're having a great summer. It is scalding here now. We finally have a summer.
The earthquakes have calmed down a bit. Since last we spoke, we had two fairly interesting earthquakes.
I didn't feel the first one. I sure felt the second one.
That second one, boy,
man, that was crazy. That was crazy. 7.1, and it was 120 miles away, and we
thank
felt
goodness.
it.
Of course, we were here for the
Northridge quake,
for the big Northridge. Yeah. So, right under the city, but nevertheless.
Woo. Well, all right, gonna jump into some anime here real quickly. Got a whole the anime is just going fast and furious. This is one of these areas that is just off the hook still with Blu-ray and DVD. So don't know how long that's going to stick around, but boy, I'll tell you, it's fast and furious. Pet Shop of Horrors, complete collection from Sentai. What an absolutely beautiful piece of art this is. I mean, it is eerie and creepy and very, very edgy in terms of story. But wow, I'll tell you, just visually, this thing is a real stunner. It is a real stunner. The story itself is like supernatural noir. You have to there's a pet shop in Chinatown and run by a guy named Count D, and what you get in this pet shop is a little nightmarish. It is literally the pet shop of horrors, and it's not where you're not getting a cute little puppy here. You're getting something very, very different. And I guess you could say, like, if this is maybe an anime version of a Dashiell Hammett story with a ghoulish supernatural overlay to it. But the artwork is it's to die for. It really is to die for. It's really, really fantastic. I highly urge even people who don't necessarily like anime, check this out. Pet Shop of Horrors. Some really extraordinary animators are doing some work on this. We also have Asura Cryin. This is from Made in Japan, and it's not as great an artwork. This is also supernatural. It's all kinds of ghosts and parallel realities and universes and monsters and things from beyond. It feels super derivative, and that most of that has to do with because everything is kind of launched through the high school experience again. I think because the people who watch this are high school age kids, so they want to feel like they're empowered. But it's a little bit familiar and kind of hard to comprehend. From Shout Factory and G Kids, who are doing a lot of anime now, is Mind Game. This is from Studio 4C, and the director Masaki Yuasa. That's Masaaki, Masaki Yuasa, whose work I think we've talked about in the past. I'm pretty sure that we have. I haven't, he's listed here as having done Devilman Crybaby, and I don't remember ever covering that. But very, very interesting style, very interesting sensibilities, not standard anime. It's anime only because Yuasa is, in fact, Japanese. But everything else about this is very avant-garde, very unusual, really kind of pushing the envelope on all kinds of new aesthetic concepts. The storyline is very new age. It goes into the afterlife, and God plays a part in this thing as well. And there's all kinds of really, really weird, surreal stuff going on. It's almost more kind of classic surrealism than anything else. It really is a very, very unusual approach to animation. It's unique in the world of anime. Again, anime only because the director and the central conceptual artist is, in fact, Japanese. And then we have from Right Stuff. We love the people at Right Stuff, one of the great ongoing anime houses. And you can get all their stuff at rightstuffanime.com, rightstuffanime.com. And this is ongoing installment of the Gundam universe. This is Mobile Suit Gundam, The Origin, Chronicle of the Loom Battlefield. If you are not completely immersed in the world of Gundam, nothing here will make any sense to you. Don't even try. Honestly, don't even try. Gundam spans many centuries and billions of light years, and it's just it's an enormous universe. It's bigger than Star Wars. It's bigger than Lord of the Rings. There's just a lot of stuff going on. This takes place in the Universal Century 0079. And it's effectively kind of an apocalyptic situation now between the Principality of Zeon and the operate. Well, I won't even get into it. There's no point. But it is what it basically is kind of an allegory for the end of the British Empire in the 19th century, the end of the British Maritime Empire, kind of at the tail end of colonialism. It's an interesting allegory in that sense. It is Mobile Suit Gundam, The Origin, Chronicle of the Loom Battlefield. Really, really very interesting. And go to rightstuffanime.com for that one. Then we've also got, also from G Kids and Shout, something a little more standard anime and really charming. Akko's Inn, OKKO, Akko's Inn. Really beautiful traditional anime, very rooted and steeped in Japanese culture, but they go out of their way to have an ethnically diverse collection of characters in this thing, which I thought was very, very interesting. Really wanted to kind of push the envelope on that and give it a sense of universality. and it's got big-eyed kids. It's kind of in the style of Pokemon and stuff like that. It wants to skew a lot younger, and it's about this little girl who has lost her parents in a car accident, moves to the countryside, very standard, typical Japanese countryside, to live with her grandmother at this kind of bed and breakfast inn that happens to be near these spring waters that have magical healing powers. And not only are the springs known for having magical powers, they're kind of like a portal to other beings and other creatures and other mystical encounters. And it's really, really charming. It gets in. It kind of becomes a little bit of a supernatural ET in a way when it's like coming of age in a supernatural sense, but it's so beautiful and so pastoral, and it's really, really sweet. And it's called Akko's Inn. All are welcome here. And then we got a whole bunch from Funimation. So let me hit up some of the Essentials line stuff here. There's a whole bunch in the Essentials line, and I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can. The Essentials are basically a new line from Funimation that this is classic anime that has been repriced, and they are making it available for collectors all over again. We've got Tokyo ESP, the complete series, part of the Essentials line. These are all Blu-rays and Blu-ray DVD combo sets. And Tokyo ESP is another high school thing. It's about a girl who's in high school, and she works and blah, 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 blah. And then something mystical happens when she sees a penguin and flying fish. And this winds up revealing her as kind of a superhero of sorts, and she's kind of like a psychic superhero, and it's very, very odd and very weird, nicely animated, but a terribly peculiar thing. Selector Season 1, also from the Essentials line, is about the card game Wixos. And I don't really understand Wixos. Even after watching 2 episodes of it, it still didn't really get it. But anyway, it's basically kind of like anime Jumanji in a way. And it's pretty good. It's okay. I think it's, if you really invest in it, which I didn't have time to do, it could probably go somewhere. Soul Eater is also a classic. People have loved Soul Eater for a long time. That is now out. The classic Soul Eater is a complete series. Also, the Master of Ragnarok and Blesser of Einherjar, Einherjar, the Master of Ragnarok and Blesser of Einherjar, the complete series. Also very, very impressively animated. But bottom line, it's really very, very much a Hobbit kind of narrative. Terror in Resonance, the complete series, part of the Essentials line, takes place in a completely destroyed Tokyo in a world where terrorism has just wiped everything out, and you got some pretty devious villains who are still carrying out an overall terrorist master plan, and there's kind of a noir story about how they're tracked down, and anyway, it's fine. It's okay. Should have been live action. Overlord is also popular. That's out in a season 3. Selector also has a season 2 out. And here's one that I thought was really very, very interesting is the One Piece Adventure of Nebulandia TV special. This goes on kind of a tangent. This is like a spin-off from One Piece. Obviously the pirate thing, and it all takes place on this island called Nebulandia, which is kind of an interesting thing. They create sort of a Hunger Games situation on the island, and it's all right. It was a nice novel twist, a nice sidebar to the overall One Piece thing. If you do watch a lot of One Piece, I don't, but a lot of people do. Laughing Under the Clouds, also from the Essentials line, the complete series. This centers around the shrine of the Kumo brothers and the ominous return of a serpent monster, and it's very mythical. I'm sure that there is something in Japanese mythology that makes sense. If somebody's out there, email us at gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com and explain Laughing Under the Clouds to me. I'm sure it's part of some Japanese mythology that I don't really understand and don't really know. Very interesting to look at, but kind of weird. Lord Marksman and Vanadis, Vanadis, the complete series, also an Essentials line. This is really interesting. Very much a mythical war thing, a fantasy Joseph Campbell heroic journey thing. Two warring tribes and some interesting superpowers in it. But yet different. Much more seriously animated. Doesn't really go for sort of the heavy, obvious anime action like a lot of the others do. It's very thoughtfully written, and I appreciate that. Lord Marksman and Vanadis. Then there's also Love Tyrant, the complete series. This is, I think it's supposed to be funny, but it didn't really make me laugh. It's one of these, what's the best way to... I guess an anime Death Becomes Her sensibility, right? Death Becomes Her. It's that kind of humor, but it's mystical, romance and love. I don't know. That might even not be a very, very good analogy. Japanese, anything dealing with Japanese kids very often has it deals with dating and teenage crushes and all that kind of weird stuff. I don't really know why anime preoccupies itself with that stuff, but it does. If you're a fan of these are all also really, really famous series. Daimidaler, I think is how you pronounce it. Prince versus Penguin Empire, the complete series. I know you're thinking Penguin Empire. Don't try to figure it out. It literally is. There is an alien penguin empire, and don't worry about it. They're attacking Earth, and we got heroes who'll protect us. Just accept the fact that there is a penguin empire from outer space. That's all you need to know. That's out, and that's actually very, very interesting. Hellsing Ultimate, the complete collection, volumes 1 through 10, which is great. This, of course, goes into this is a variation on the Professor Hellsing of vampire lore, of Dracula lore, elevated to kind of anime superhero, and with a mythical England, and it's cool stuff. If Hellsing is some of the better anime in recent years. Kamisama Kiss season 1 is back out again. That is also high school fantasy fulfillment, and fans will be thrilled with that. Black Lagoon, the complete collection. Classics, also one that a lot of people are very fond of. And then the last 3 are Buddy Complex, the complete series, the Essentials line as well, and Brothers Conflict, the complete series, plus the OVAs Essentials. So all of this stuff from Funimation is, there's a lot here for everybody. It's worth checking out. Everybody has some excuse for all ages and tastes. So it's a good month for anime. Go for it. Knock yourselves out.
Good. Shall we do a little bit of the LGBT stuff? We only got a few over here to knock off, which I find sort of interesting. Actually, the first one is a film called Kanarie. This is a really, really interesting little movie set set in South Africa during the apartheid era. They had mandatory military service there during that period. This film is about a young man who's forced into his mandatory military service, and he becomes a part of the military choir.
Oh, yeah.
And they travel all around the country to different army bases and places where soldiers are stationed, and very often doing heinous and horrible things to various different folks in the townships. But his band of choir singers, most of whom happen to be gay, as this character is, comes into town. They sing these beautiful songs, these chorals, and it's just it's a completely different juxtaposition to what the rest of the military is doing. What's also interesting is that they can see very clearly the way the apartheid system is working to discriminate against the blacks in South Africa, yet they find themselves still hiding their own sexuality. So they have this sort of commiseration with the group based on that sort of kinship there, which it's really an interesting story. So Kanarie, lovely film. I wish there were more special features on it, but there's only an interview and a couple of promo videos there. Love Blooms is another neat little story, fairly straightforward little story. About a guy who has this girlfriend who he's deeply in love with, but she already knows that their relationship is over and she's going to break up with him, and she eventually does. Ironically, or interestingly, I should say, he finds himself falling in love again, but this time with a man. with a young filmmaker. He wants to be a filmmaker, and they have a lot in common. And he just sort of finds himself drifting into this relationship, and it's just simply about how things like that can happen every now and again. It's just a perfectly lovely story, and of course, his girlfriend decides she was wrong and wants him back. It's always one of those stories too. Game Girls. This is an interesting film. It takes place mostly on Los Angeles Skid Row, right here where we live, and it's about these young women who are gay and the time that they have trying to navigate homelessness in Los Angeles as young gay women. Which homelessness, period, tough thing. Homelessness as a woman, tough thing. Homelessness as a young gay woman on the streets of Los Angeles, you don't even want to know, except that you do, because it's in this very powerful and riveting movie called Game Girls, and it really, really is a powerful, moving story about this couple and how they insist on being themselves no matter what the circumstances happen to be. So that's some lovely, lovely films from our LGBTQ community, and I think I'm going to pop over to
new movies.
A few of the new movies,
and we have a giveaway. We have a couple of giveaways today.
We do.
We got 2 giveaways. One of them has to do with one of the new movies, and the other one will be tied in later on because we also have an interview, which we will discuss later on. But we'll get through these new movies and the first giveaway first. So let's hop to it.
Okay. So look, I thought this movie was going to do a little bit better than it did. I found it a serviceable film. The Best of Enemies, Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, I thought this would be better than it was.
Yeah, it was serviceable, but not particularly good. She's kind of playing that part that she plays, and he's having fun.
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out why this didn't work better, because this is one of those.
You'd think it would have worked at least as well as Green Book.
At least as well as Green Book, and I was also thinking of Cry the Beloved Country. Which has which sort of pushed a lot of the buttons that I think this wants to push, but it for some reason doesn't get there, and I'm not quite sure why.
And it's really funny because this one sort of leans into the comedy a little bit, which is sort of funny in and of itself, given the subject. 1971, busing is a thing in the United States of America. This black woman finds herself on a community committee opposite a man named C.P. Ellis, a dyed-in-the-wool racist Klansman. And Ann Atwater and this man, these are actual historical figures, sort of go at it for a while. But what they find is that they have more things in common than you would think. Mm-hmm. And it's he who actually changes over the course of their acquaintance come friendship, ultimately. Yeah. And much of the movie is about that. It was poignant and kind of sweet. I rather liked it, and I wish it had done better. But it didn't. Bonus features, including Making of the Connection, which is more or less the Ann Atwater story, and the friendship, the unlikely friendship of Ann and CPL. It's a lovely movie in a particular kind of way, I thought, anyway. Let's see. After. So this is basically just a little romance about a young woman who's just having a perfect little high school life. She goes off to, he has a boyfriend, great in school, her teachers, all that kind of stuff. She goes off to college. Her first semester in college she meets another guy, a darker, more brooding, sexy kind of guy. And it's about the decision she's going to make for the rest of her life after she meets this new guy in her life. This is a sort of it's just a sort of passionate love story in the vein of maybe Endless Love or something like that from way back in the day. It's a decent film that I rather enjoyed, and I think other people might like it too. Bonus features include some deleted scenes and one or two other things that folks might find interesting. After,
cool,
folks, Johnny Depp. For a long time now, I've been talking about Johnny Depp, and I've been thinking about what the hell happened to Johnny Depp. And he played that pirate 4 or 5 times in those big movies, and he went broke, or he got taken for a bunch of cash or something. I don't know what the hell happened to Johnny Depp, but he kind of went away for a while.
Yeah, he bumps around, but yeah.
Yeah, in 2018, Johnny Depp made a film in which Johnny Depp was playing a normal human being, not a pirate, not pretending to be Keith Richards or anything like that. It's called The Professor. It did not register at all. In terms of a theatrical release for a film by Johnny Depp. And, and anyway, it's a perfectly, again, serviceable film. Johnny Depp playing a college professor, sort of in the vein of, what was that Robin Williams film, Dead Poets Society.
Yep.
He's a guy who finds out he has a terminal illness, and he sort of decides to cut loose. and carpe diem becomes his sort of theme, so to speak. He's married to Rosemary DeWitt. What's her name? It's not Rosemary DeWitt. I forget what her name is. And he has a couple of students, and he's basically having a carpe diem sort of moment as he finds out that it is Rosemary DeWitt. He's not going to live long, and everybody thinks he's going crazy, but he hasn't gone crazy. He's just learned that when you know you're going to die, you better start living. And, look, Johnny Depp looks normal in this film. He doesn't have on any costumes. He's just wearing a suit and tie and more or less acting like a normal person. So if you been wondering where Johnny Depp went, check him out in that movie.
He's got a few performances over the years that just nobody paid attention to him.
Yeah, What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
Yeah,
that's my probably last the Ninth Gate. I really liked him in that.
I don't think I ever saw that.
That was actually pretty good. The Bit Bad Fox is just absolutely beautiful animation from the Academy Award nominated team that gave us Ernest and Celestine a couple of years ago. This is just so sweet and wonderful. A sort of almost Warner Brothers style animation, with all of these really, really funny characters who are sort of engaged in these sort of like animals out of a water sort of situation. You have a fox who's the mother of a family of chicks. You have a rabbit who wants to be a stork. You have a duck that wants to be Santa Claus. And it's just the sweetest, funniest, most wonderful little film. Simple line and ink, actually more like watercolor animation. This is the kind of stuff that I really, truly love, much more than, I'll say, like Toy Story 4, which is, Toy Story 4 was fine. Didn't do all that well at the box office.
Isn't that weird? I thought it might.
Sort of strange. But, people didn't cotton to it in the way that they did to Toy Story 3. Sometimes, I think, because they like Toy Story 3 so much.
Could be. That was all they needed.
Yeah. So they cut. But don't miss this lovely, lovely little animation. Make sure you get it. And by the way, this is not just for kids. This is a beautiful animation for adults.
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
Really,
really
sweet stuff. Pet Sematary, man.
There's our giveaway.
Adaptation of the Stephen King from 1989. That first film, 1989. Did the junket for that film, Pet Sematary, back in the day. Here we are, 30 years later,
with a new one.
And I tell you what, look, this is fine, but it takes itself way too seriously. It's a Stephen King adaptation. Relax, people.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Native American cemetery, you bury something there, it comes back, but it don't come back exactly the same. It usually comes back wanting to try to kill you and eat you. This 4K Blu-ray has an alternate ending, 7 deleted scenes, and 90 minutes of bonus material. So it is a hell of a thing for our giveaway, right?
Yep, and we are giving away 2 copies, 2 regular 4Ks, but we're also giving away, a grand prize. So here's what we get. It's all going to be randomly chosen. Send us an email to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com, either one. And make sure it gets to us by December 21st. If it's December 22nd, July. July 21st. July 21st, not July 22nd, July 21st. And put PET, P-E-T, in the subject line. Put your name and address in the body of the email. And we will choose 3 very lucky people. 2 of you will get regular 4Ks of the new Pet Sematary. 1 of you will get the grand prize, which includes a 4K signed by the director plus a sweatshirt. How's that, Paramount?
Mm-hmm.
Paramount is looking out for you people.
That's what I'm talking about.
So that's fun stuff. So you will get if you're the grand prize winner, you will get a 4K signed by the director and a sweatshirt, and then 2 other people will just get regular 4Ks. So go ahead and send us an email to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com. And put PET in the subject line, name and address in the body of the email. Make sure it gets to us by July 21st, no later, July 21st. And we do love it when Paramount does that. And we also have another Paramount giveaway that we'll talk about later when the interview comes around. All right,
Thank
what
you
else?
A couple of more under new movies. This one really surprised me that it didn't do a little bit better, particularly given the source of the story. Hotel Mumbai
I expect this to do better too.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, it's a fairly thrilling movie about true events. The 2008 terrorist attack on the Taj Hotel in Mumbai, in India.
I remember that like it was yesterday. I was riveted. I was
it went on for several hours, for one thing, and it was covered live. It was harrowing events. And out of that came a number of stories, particularly those regarding some of the staff of the hotel, including the very important chef of the hotel and a few of the waiters, one played by Dev Patel in this movie, who put themselves in harm's way to sort of protect, in some cases actually save. In some cases, they actually sacrificed themselves for some of their guests and some of the other things that went on during this extremely harrowing period. Anyway, it's a powerful and riveting story about true events that I thought was fairly captivating. Bonus features here include Finding the Story, a little video documentary, The Real Life Heroes, which actually talks about several of those people, natives there at the hotel who put themselves in jeopardy for their guests, including some of the characters played by the actors here. And so, I thought it was a pretty good movie, and I wish it would have done a little bit better. The Aftermath, again, a film that I thought might have done a little bit better, a post-World War II drama with Keira Knightley and Jason Clarke, Ned Willis in the film. So it's set during this period in Hamburg after the city had been more or less destroyed
by the bombs.
By the bombs, and we have this colonel who's assigned to the city to sort of rebuild things. He's billeted in this rather prestigious home. And for whatever reason, he allows the home's owner, the home's owner, played by Stellan Skarsgård, and his daughter to stay in the home with him and his wife, Keira Knightley. All kinds of enmity is at play here to do with what happened during the war and grief. It's a really, really interesting and powerful story that didn't do very well. Again, but I got to tell you, this is a fairly charged and interesting and complicated drama. That I nevertheless recommend. Some of these movies I think perhaps don't do as well as they might, simply because people are waiting to see, particularly the dramas.
Yeah.
On the streaming services, and I suppose it's okay. So for some, but I got to tell you, this is a gorgeous movie to watch, and it really looked great on the big screen. I happen to see it on the big screen. Nevertheless, here for the Blu-ray, we have deleted scenes and audio commentary from the director James Kent, and a few other bits and pieces of delightful special features. And then lastly, we have this movie called Beach Bum.
Oh, dear. They tried to make this for so many years.
Oh, this nutty Harmony Korine film. It's Harmony Korine, Julian Donkey Boy.
It's an obsession of Matthew McConaughey's to get this movie made.
And so, and he finally does. And interesting that he got Harmony Korine. It's just a pothead movie. More of an acid trip movie, to be specific. Anyway, Snoop Dogg and Matthew McConaughey and Ela Fisher and do this goofy movie about this sort of rebellious stoner guy named Moondog. Come on, Matt, who you grew up watching, with long hair. And I don't know if people know this about Matt McConaughey, but Matt McConaughey is more or less this guy.
Yeah, he is
in real life.
He is. He absolutely is.
Beach bum kind of guy who pulled off a hell of an acting career.
And I should point out too, just so that everybody understands what's going on here. So this character that Matthew McConaughey plays, being as I live in the same city as Matthew McConaughey, and I grew up with people like this. Like when I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and do a little tangent. With Sean Penn's character, Spicoli, in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Sean Penn is 3 years older than I am, okay? So Sean Penn, and I knew Chris in school. Sean and I, and obviously Chris and Charlie and everybody else who went to school at that
time.
Chris
Penn and Charlie Sheen and all those guys.
All went to school with these brothers from one family who all are that character, that Spicoli character. Yeah. Literally that guy. The youngest of them was actually like Spicoli crossed with Animal on the Muppets. Okay? Like he'd walk up and down the halls going, banging his head on railings and, scaring the girls. Okay, so those are characters that really exist. Matthew McConaughey's character here really is who he is in life. And you remember when he was accosted by paparazzi on the beach? Yeah. And two guys came after them and assaulted the paparazzi and broke their cameras and threw them in the ocean and had assault charges filed against them. One of those guys has been on our city council for 6 years. I'm just pointing that out. Actually, for 8 years. It'll be 8 years at the end of this year. So, yeah, he's termed out. But this is small town.
Loosely based on the true stories.
Oh, my goodness gracious. All right. Well, we've got an interview and 2 more giveaways, actually, but a big giveaway that goes with the interview. We're going to get to that right at the end of the show, but we've got foreign right now. We got a lot of really cool foreign stuff. And I'm going to start off and mention a couple from a couple of really, really interesting foreign language films, both of them from the good people at Big World Pictures. And the first one is something that I like very, very much, and it's very, very close to my heart. It's called In the Last Days of the City. This is an Egyptian film by Tamer El-Said, and it played theatrically here in Los Angeles, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And it is really an incredibly powerful film. The stuff that's coming out of the Arab world lately is quite extraordinary, and this is a beautiful, beautiful poetic film that it basically looks at at all of the changes that take place in Cairo right around the time of the fall of the Mubarak regime. Yeah. And it's just, it's all through the eyes of an actual filmmaker who's trying to capture this moment in time. And it's really very unusual, and it's a very textured thing, and it's poetic, and it's lyrical, and it's an absolutely beautiful movie. And I really highly recommend it. It's called In the Last Days of the City, out on DVD. The other one is from director Julia Murat. It's a Brazilian, Argentinian, and French co-production. It is in Portuguese, so it's primarily a Brazilian film with Argentinian and French money in it. This has played a whole bunch of festivals. It's called Pendular. It was also at the AFI Fest in Los Angeles, so a lot of people here saw it at the time. And Julia Murat is a second-time filmmaker, and this focuses on the experiences of this young couple who move into basically a loft, and how do I even not give this away? The loft has an interesting geography. That's the only way I'm going to put this. The art has an interesting geography, and the geography defines their relationship, their work, how they relate to the world, and it is also very poetic and very unusual and very, very interesting, and it's worth checking out. The movie is Pendular, Pendular, and it's just lovely and intimate. And then I'm going to mention this and then turn it over to Tim for some other stuff. We got this is our second giveaway of the day, Furie, Furie. This is a terrific, terrific, powerful film from Well Go. They have given us 4 copies for giveaway. So go ahead and send us an email if you want one of the 4 to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com. Has to get to us by July 21st. Put Furie, Furie, in the subject line, body, name and address in the body of the email. This is just a really, really sensational action movie. About a girl who is kidnapped by a sex trafficking ring, and her mother, who it turns out to be the mom you don't want to cross. Mom used to be an outlaw, and mom knows how to wreak vengeance and bring her daughter home. If it sounds a little bit like Taken, that's exactly what it is. It is a female version of Taken, and it stars Veronica Enjo from Star Wars The Last Jedi, and she is fierce, and she is going to save her daughter, and man, is this a whole lot of fun female, just bone-busting action. It is really great. The movie is Furie, Furie, giving away 4 of those. Gods@digigods.com, gods@cinegods.com, put Furie in the subject line.
Sweet. A couple here, also foreign language. This one is just a beautiful story. Un Traductor is based on a loosely true story about this doctor. It's set during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And during that period, when the Soviet Union and, of course, Cuba were still staunch allies, many of the children who experienced radiation exposure during that disaster were sent to Cuba because Cuba had better hospitals.
Yep.
The one thing the Cubans actually still do have are lots and lots of well-trained doctors. This stars Rodrigo Santoro as one of the doctors who receives these children from Chernobyl during this period. And he becomes engaged in taking care of these Chernobyl children to the detriment of his own family, his own life. And right during this period, of course, the Berlin Wall falls.
Yeah.
And of course, when the Berlin Wall falls, then the Soviet Union is not a very good sponsor for Cuba anymore. So all of that is going on during this film. As it's set against the backdrop of Chernobyl and everything. It's just a really, really powerful movie. I love Rodrigo Santoro.
He's great.
Brazilian actor,
Yeah.
actually, but really, really wonderful. Thoroughly dug him in this movie, and it's a powerful and really neat movie too. Let's see here.
Let me do one. I got one. Yeah. I got another one here. Three Faces by Jafar Panahi. If you haven't followed the Odyssey, Jafar Panahi, at the time of the Green Revolution, supported the wrong people, well, the right people, in Iran and was banned from filmmaking by the Iranian government. And, of course, naturally, being Jafar Panahi, he responded to his ban from filmmaking by making movies. He continued to make movies even under house arrest. He even he did Taxi, but driving around the city. He made a movie about his fight with the authorities and talking to his lawyers. The man will not be constrained. Jafar Panahi is the conscience of Iran, and he is officially no longer under house arrest. He's not really supposed to be making movies anymore either at this point, but he decided to make Three Faces, and it is the best film he's made in years. It's a real movie. It's not shot with a digital camera underground or on the fly. It's with actors and a script and the whole thing. And the weird thing is he plays himself in it. Yeah. And it is a really, really interesting meta film. It's truly, truly fascinating. And it's very much like a cross between what he's been doing during his punishment period and what he was doing before that. And this is hard to not divulge it because this centers around. There's a mystery here. There's a mystery about that centers on some cell phone video and whether what is shown on the cell phone video is true or not. There's a question about this, and I won't tell you what the video shows. You learn very early watching this what's going on, but I'm going to leave it to everybody's imagination right now. What the cell phone shows may or may not be true, and that, of course, is an interesting allegory for everything that's going on in Iran, in his movies. He wants you to question the truth, question what you're being told. Don't believe everything that's shown to you. There's a real message to this, and Panahi and one of his longtime associates, this woman who also plays herself, they undertake to unravel the mystery, and it's fascinating. You have no idea where this thing goes. It takes you into corners of Iranian rural society that most people have never even seen before, would have no idea even existed. And it's a really, really interesting film, and it's beautifully made. This is from Kino, and it features a booklet interview with Jafar Panahi and some trailers, and it is on Blu-ray, and you got to check it out. It was also at the Toronto Film Festival. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie, Three Faces. The next film here is an old John Woo film that most people have probably never seen. This is from Film Movement Classics. It's on Blu-ray. Heroes Shed No Tears. This is from 1986.
Oh.
For some crazy reason, I thought this was earlier. I thought this was like 81 or something, but there goes my memory. Anyway, 1986 John Woo movie, when John Woo is sort of starting to become John Woo. And this is right before he made A Better Tomorrow. So you really see it all kind of coming together. You know, John Woo started making just work like martial arts movies and stuff that you would never associate with John Woo, where he's just a hired hand. This is where you begin to actually see him develop his style, develop his sensibilities. He's coming out of his corner, and he's doing a remarkable job. And A Better Tomorrow is usually regarded as the film that sort of started the whole thing. Anyway, this is right on the eve of that. And it's a war film. It's a commando. It's a commando mission movie. Maybe his version of Delta Force or something like that. All of them, their mission is to capture a drug lord out of the Golden Triangle, and it's a kind of predictable genre thing, but it's the style. It's the way that he treats the jungle, the way he choreographs the scenes. You really, really feel like this guy is something different. There's something new. And it's a terrific film. It's a beautiful Blu-ray transfer. They really, really did a very, very good job here. They worked with Fortune Star on this, got some really good elements, and gave us a great transfer. And you get an essay by Grady Hendrix and an interview with Eddie Coe, who is the star of the film. It's Heroes Shed No Tears from Film Movement Classics on Blu-ray.
Yeah, good stuff, man. A couple of really lovely ones here. This film, No Date, No Signature. Very powerful Iranian film by Vihad Javalan. That's the way you say his name, I think. So this movie follows a doctor. He's actually a pathologist. He has a car accident where he hits this little boy. He wants to take the little boy to the clinic, to the hospital. He offers the father money. The father doesn't take the money. The father refuses all of this. This has to do with class in the context of what's going on in this scene. He finds out later that the little boy, who is in fact taken to the hospital, dies. Because he is a pathologist, he's able to take a look at the coroner's report for the little boy, and it doesn't add up for him. He feels like something else is going on. Of course, he's guilty because he hit the little boy with his car in the first place. It's just a wonderful story that exposes all sorts of issues around class within the Iran that we probably don't know about here as we think about the things that are going on between the United States and that country. But it's really, really a very seductive movie. That really just goes into that very specific point about class distinctions in a country that we know very little about, but it's actually one hell of a thing. Becoming Astrid.
Oh, I like this movie a lot.
It really is wonderful. You want to do this one?
No. Go ahead, hit it off. It's a fun movie. It's really sweet. Astrid, of course, being the one who created Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah, Pippi Longstocking. So, and a number of children's novels. Yeah. And this is simply the story of her life, how she came. More or less, she was Pippi Longstocking. Yeah. But for a bit of a imagination. Yeah. So she sort of wrapped herself into those stories that she told her. It's a really beautifully done film that I thoroughly enjoy. Beautiful to look at too. This film, Becoming Astrid. By Alba August, Becoming Astrid, the Pippi Longstocking story. It's really great. This movie here, the second time around, I loved for a couple of different reasons. The reason that I loved it most is because Linda Thorson stars in it. It's about an older woman who's in a convalescent home, and she runs into this man while she's convalescing after she's broken her hip, played by Stuart Margolin, and they start to fall in love, and it's about how that relationship develops later in life. Now, those of you who are like me and Wade know that Linda Thorson replaced Diana Rigg as the spy on the Avengers. So it was Kathy Gale. Yeah, who then be Diana Rigg. Yeah, and then Linda Thorson, and who played Tara King.
Yeah, and Honor Blackman.
And Honor Blackman played Kathy Gale. Honor played Kathy. Yes. Diana Rigg played Emma Peel.
Right.
Linda played Tara King.
And then in the new Avengers.
From
AbFab.
AbFab, yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So Linda Thorson, look. After experiencing
Joanna Lumley,
yeah. After experiencing Diana Rigg as Emma Peel, I thought I was done.
Yeah.
And then she came into that show, and I got to tell you, I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick around.
I'm with you. It's like when Cheryl Ladd came on and replaced Farrah.
I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to stick around. That show. Midaq Alley. Starring Selma Hayek, directed by Jorge Fons. So this is an adaptation of an Edouard Marfus novel, a Nobel laureate, that was set in Cairo. He did an entire series of those novels. They were called the Cairo stories, and they're wonderful, wonderful. They transferred this story to Mexico City. And what we're doing is we're looking at a number of different characters as they overlap a little bit. We have the owner of a pub and what's going on in his cantina. We have a man who's married and has a son who sort of gives into latent homosexual feelings. We have Selma Hayek's character and all that she's doing. It's really, really just this beautiful humanistic movie. I read all those Cairo stories. Now, I think Edward lived to be like 90, 99 years old. He only died a couple of years, Edouard Marfus. Mm-hmm. And those just one. And it's really interesting, though, that they transferred all of that to Mexico City, and
Yeah.
it still works. It still works.
Fascinating.
Fascinating stuff.
Got a couple of German films here. One is actually a German-Mongolian co-production. How often do you hear about that?
Yeah.
This is from IndiePix Unlimited line, which you can also see on Prime Video channels on Amazon Prime. This thing was at the Munich Film Festival in 2015. And it is, they call it a German-Mongolian love drama. It's just a weird thing to say. But in any case, the movie is called Don't Look at Me That Way, and it is very Fassbinderian or Fassbinder-esque. I think Fassbinder would love something like this. Basically, you have a couple of women live next to each other who wind up having a relationship, and one of them has a daughter, and one of them has a father who enters the equation at a certain point and makes it get all real complicated and weird. And this is really all this is about, is that you're taking some very damaged and interesting and curious characters with baggage, and you're dropping them into this pressure cooker of a situation in these adjacent apartments, and you're just letting the chemistry happen. And it explores all kinds of really, really interesting issues, and in a very, very tight little not even an hour and a half, I don't think. It goes really quickly. It's a very interesting movie, a very unusual movie. Don't Look at Me That Way. It's really worth checking out. And then the other one is called Styx, named after the famous mythical river. This is by the director Wolfgang Fischer, and it has a terrific lead performance in it from Suzanne Wolf, with 2 Fs, who won an award for this at the German Film Awards. Essentially, it's about a woman who decides to go to Ascension Island all by herself on a boat, just do a little solo boat trip to Ascension Island. And along the way, she comes across some refugees who are their ship is endangered, and that then obviously precipitates a whole litany of really, really interesting character engagements that change how she and the refugees see each other, see the world, see reality. It becomes a very challenging encounter, a surprise encounter at sea that just challenges everything. It's very interesting. It's not the fact that it's named Styx is an intentional reference to the mythical river, and it's a really well done film. Wolfgang Fischer can probably write his Hollywood ticket with this. It's that well directed. It's a very, very sharp film. Styx.
Interesting stuff, man. An Afghan love story. This is a powerful and moving film. Although, I should warn you, tragic because it's an Afghan love story. And so it's set in Kabul. A guy named Mustafa. He's this waiter. Runs into this beautiful young female law student, charms her. They start a relationship. They're very mindful of all of the sort of societal rules about that. In any case, she gets pregnant. She tells him he does not support her, does not consent to marriage. And basically the rest of the movie is about what she faces in the context of these circumstances. A pregnant woman in Kabul, Afghanistan. It doesn't go well, as you might imagine. It's a powerful and deeply moving film. Look, the film is all about the strength of these women, and it's astounding from that context, but it's really really disturbing as well. Agony. So in this film, this is kind of disturbing too for a whole bunch of reasons, but stick with it if you can, because it's about machoism and toxic masculinity, which is a thing that we're talking about in society right now. So a young woman is murdered, her body is dismembered and dumped all over Vienna. To the police, fairly quickly, 2 young men become prime suspects. Either one of them could have done it, although neither one of them have particular motives to have done it. They don't overlap, these two suspects of this murder. They have completely disparate lives. They're very different men, but both of them, in their own way, were perfectly capable of committing this murder. And over the arc of this movie, we find out that one of them definitely did. You got another one over there?
Yes, I do. This is a great, great movie. This is really, really highly, highly recommended. This is on Blu-ray. It is called Transit, and this is from director Christian Petzold, who previously did Phoenix and Barbara, which was Oscar nominated. And Petzold is one of the best filmmakers in the world. he's going to continue to have a phenomenal career. It's just going to be up and up and up and up for him. The best thing about this was described by IndieWire, and they even put it on the packaging too, as Casablanca as written by Kafka, and that's the best description I can possibly give you. It's based on a 1944 novel by the novelist Anna Seegers, and it is all it's about a guy who when how to even explain this this amazing odyssey of his. It's a swapped identity thing. So the Nazis are getting ready to invade Paris, and Georg decides that he's going to just escape to Marseille, and there he takes on a new identity and decides that he's going to come to America, where where the new identity becomes even more convoluted than he possibly could have imagined, and that leads into another mystery nested inside the mystery, and there's a missing person, and it really does create this Kafka-esque labyrinth of mystery and identity. You know, the question of who are you, and can you become someone else, and can you get lost in a new society, in a new culture, and all against the backdrop of war. There's so much going on. I'm totally shortchanging it. It's a really, really interesting movie. It's called Transit. Has some great performances in it. Franz Rogowski, Paula Beer. Really tremendous cast, and some very, very cool extras on here on the making of the film, an interview with Christian Petzold, some other featurettes and Q&A. It's a good film. Really check it out. Transit, worth buying, I would say. Get this on Blu-ray.
A couple of more. School of Life. This is a lovely film directed by Nicolas de Vener. It's a French film. It's about a man who grew up in an orphanage in suburban Paris. His whole entire life he spent in the sort of city suburbs of Paris. He meets this couple who run a sort of game preserve out in the countryside, and they coax him into coming out to the country with him. And it's about how his life, his perspective, his understanding of things changes when he actually goes out into the countryside and starts living among the folks out there. It actually involves this poacher that he meets, who's like the nemesis of the guy who he's staying. There's a whole little thriller thing that goes on there. But mostly, it's simply about the way being in nature in the countryside affects and changes this man who had only ever known the city. It's a lovely, lovely film. Particularly beautiful because it's the cinematographer, Eric Gouchard, shot Belle and Sebastian, that beautiful movie Belle and Sebastian. So, and this movie is really about the beauty of the countryside. Lastly, over here, I've got this little, again, wonderful little film. Director's Malad Alami. It's called The Charmer. It's this beautiful little movie. A young Iranian man is living in Denmark. He wants to get married to a citizen so he can stay in Denmark. He's a good-looking guy. He puts on a suit. He goes out every night. And he tries to meet these women. And he has all these one-night stands in terrible circumstances. And then finally, he meets a woman with whom he has everything in common. But, of course, she, too, is Iranian. And marrying her won't do him any good. But she's the one he's in love with. Whatever will he do? It's a lovely and sweet film. I really, really found it quite charming. And I think you should check it out.
Mojin, The Worm Valley. This is a sequel to Mojin, The Lost Legend, which was kind of like a martial artsy, Indiana Jones thing. This is from Huayi Brothers in China, and the sequel. We are back in the company of the legendary Indiana Jones. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean, Hu Bai Yi, basically a Chinese Indiana Jones with a sword instead of a whip. And he's looking for the tomb of the Emperor Xian. And, of course, the Emperor Xian's tomb is on an island with a whole lot of monsters and giant monstrosities and horrible things. And, it's a monster movie. It's basically an Indiana Jones monster movie. It's a lot of fun, actually. Mojin, The Worm Valley. And then the last two that we have here is the very fine Dogman, Matteo Garrone's film, not on Blu-ray. This is on DVD. Don't know why they did that. Garrone, who of course did the famous Gomorrah, is a terrific stylist, and Dogman is an unusual movie. It's very different from what he's done before. It takes place in this little village. and there appear to be no real. It's a very unusual village. Let's just put it that way. And it centers around this guy, this very nebbishy guy who works at a dog grooming salon, and winds up being sort of lured into a delinquent activity. Let's just say an unusual scheme by this local thug, and where this scheme goes, you would never guess in a million years. You don't see. Honestly, you have no idea where this story is leading. You just sort of buy into the fact this is an unusual guy, unusual town. He grooms dogs, and then it takes a left turn, and you don't know whether to cry or laugh or scream. It really is an unusual movie.
It was. I just thought it was fantastic. That little guy and that sociopath asshole.
Yeah, the one that hires him.
That hires him. Yeah. And then he forces him to do that thing. And man, yeah.
It's weird, right?
Yeah.
It's weird, but it's good.
Yeah,
like good, weird in a good way.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about weird in a bad way. So, well, Tim will disagree with me on this, but we're going to go out with the ridiculous, which is Jean-Luc Godard, always a great way to go out, with his film Detectives, with a great cast: Claude Brasseur, Natalie Baye, Johnny Hallyday. It's a great cast.
Yeah.
But
it's a coherent Godard film. It actually has a narrative.
Well, this is right about when he was ready to throw in the towel on narrative in 1985. This is right. I think he cracked about 1987. I think he lost his mind. But essentially, this feels like. I mean, there's a little bit of a melodrama. It feels like it's a little bit of Truffaut, a little bit of everybody that he knew, right? He's sort of trying to step on everybody's genres, saying, I can do this better than you, I can do this better than you, I can do this better than you. And it's a little bit unusual, but anyway, Jean-Pierre Léaud and Laurent Terzieff play a couple of detectives who are trying to figure out the case of an assassination. And then there's this boxer played by Johnny Hallyday, who's staying in the same hotel and he's got a young protege that he's bringing up, and he's trying to prepare him. And then there's all this other noir-y stuff that links it all up, and it's almost like a farce that's not funny. It's like a tragic farce, if that makes sense.
And it's very American because, the thing that we always say about the New Wave directors is how much they were influenced. But this is like a ridiculously American film.
It sort of is.
And
what? It's like a Wim Wenders movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a Wim Wenders movie.
It sort of floats off a little bit.
Yeah, well, there it is. So here's where we're going out. So a very, very good friend of mine just wrote a book, an amazing book. He was on CBS this morning riding roller coasters touting his book last week. He's been all over the place. He's been in every city in the country touting this thing. Steven Silverman is a tremendous author. Steven's written a lot of great books. He wrote the Stanley Donen biography. He wrote the original David Lean biography, Coffee Table book. And he's been a journalist, newspaper guy forever. He's originally from California, lives and works in New York, and he has a new book called The Amusement Park. This is an epic book. This is an amazing book. And it is literally the story, the history of amusement parks and theme parks going back into like 300-400 years, and the origins of roller coasters. And then he gets into Coney Island and the prostitutes, and he calls them the schemers and dreamers. It's all about the schemers and dreamers who built amusement parks, and obviously leading up to Walt Disney, who reinvented the concept for our day. And it's a tremendous book. There are so many great stories in it. It is a wonderful book, The Amusement Park. And I had a chance to talk to Steven in the middle of his very, very busy, crazy press tour, and talk to him about this book. And here's what we're going to do to help promote this book. We have a giveaway, again, courtesy of Paramount. And we reviewed it a few weeks ago. It's the book Wonder Park. And Paramount agreed to give away 3 Blu-rays of Wonder Park along with our promotion of the amusement park. And you can go ahead and send us an email at gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com with Park, P-A-R-K, in the subject line, name and address in the body. And by July 21st, we will choose 3 very lucky people to get a Blu-ray of Wonder Park. And without further ado, here is my interview with Steven Silverman, author of The Amusement Park.
One of the great joys of this job is being able to interview people that I actually know and admire, and in this case, I can double that. Because Steven Silverman is simply someone I am proud to know, and I so respect his writing. I'm so proud to call you a friend. And Steven, let me just preface this by explaining to people that you've written two of the great showbiz books of all time, biography of Stanley Donen and the original David Lean biography/coffee table book that I fell in love with and thumbed through when I was much younger on such a daily basis that I had to buy another one to keep it pristine. That's a true story.
Too.
Well, Steven, you have a new book out, which I dare say really outdoes everything else you've ever done. It's The Amusement Park, 900 Years of Thrills and Spills and the Dreamers and Schemers Who Built Them. This is an astonishing book. And what I think people may not realize is there has never been a resource before on the history of amusement parks. You have created the first and to date the only serious reference book on this history. You said you did this, you wrote it and researched it in 7.5 months. Could you talk about how you executed such a superhuman feat? There is so much information here.
It just proves I have no life.
Well, not true if you were going to all these amusement parks.
It is true. I mean, I knew nothing about Bartholomew Fair, and that is where I started. Granted, there were certain areas I did know about. To be honest, when I got to Disneyland, I almost had to. I had to go back and insert source notes, so the book would be, continuous and match the rest of the book. Because all that, I grew up with that. I knew it. But the rest I did have to piece together. But it was the most enjoyable jigsaw puzzle I created it, then put together. The only thought, I just sat down. I'm a serial writer. I sat down and I wrote. Now, mind you, these days, so many of the great libraries, from the British Museum to Stanford University to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, their libraries are online. And that makes such a tremendous difference. And I knew what I was looking for. When I didn't, again, it was a wonderful puzzle. And I would spring out of bed in the morning, and I couldn't wait to write. I would reread what I had written the day before, clean that up, and then forge ahead. And the shape of the book really took place as I wrote it. And then I would break to walk the dog, and as we would sit in the park or play in the park, my mind was back on the book and thinking, well, this chapter will really play better if I move it here. And that, that's how it is. I'm an old newspaper man, and even quicker than a newspaper, which was a daily deadline.
Wow.
I worked at the New York Post when I was in my 20s.
Well, see, it's discipline. Discipline is what does it.
Yeah, and then there was, I started People Magazine's website. Well, that was fine at the beginning because it was really, that too was a daily deadline. But as the internet progressed and everything moved online, you had minute-by-minute deadlines. I'll never forget the phone call. Michael Jackson died. Start writing. Well, this was like like in an extreme moment like that, except I enjoyed it no end. I turned in the manuscript a week early, a week before deadline.
Wow, that is...
Yeah, I can't explain it. When it works, it works. My David Lean book, that wrote itself. David was... It was a pleasure to write. And when your subject is a pleasure, it moves brilliantly. Stanley Donen was a difficult character. I can say that now. And that book took 4.5 years. And it just shows anything can happen. But this one, I just loved it.
You have both inspired and guilted me at the same time. I'm gonna try to be more productive with my time now. I feel so deficient.
You have a personal life. I do too.
Well, but it's what I find so incredible about this is, number one, realizing how old the history of amusement parks is. Talk about how the idea came to you, how this originated, and talk about the origins of theme park rides. Really, how far back that goes.
Well, my own interest is that what you want to know?
Yeah.
Well, I've always liked them. I mean, I was a kid. I grew up in Southern California, and even I remember when the Sunday night television show came on and Walt Disney was previewing this place he said he was building. And I know I must have bugged my parents to take me there because my father did. I still remember getting sick. I still get car sick on the Santa Ana freeway. But we went, and I cried because I didn't see Donald Duck. But I grew up. But it was always, who didn't want to go to Disney? What kid didn't want to go to Disneyland? And I never outgrew that. And there were merry-go-rounds all over Southern California, not just Beverly Park. But there was one near my aunt and uncle's in Westchester, actually near, I would swear, I never looked it up again, near Hillside Cemetery, where my family is. But there was a merry-go-round there with a small roller coaster. There were roller coasters on piers. Turns out those sort of shut down in the 30s. I seem to have them in my mind. I'm not that old. I'm a baby boomer, and it always seemed to me, I would always, if we ever pass an amusement park anywhere, to this day, I'll stop and look at the landscape and wonder how it got there, who built it, who goes there, and all that sort of remained. I wrote a book on the history of the Catskills. The publisher said, "What do you want to do next? Are you Adirondacks?" And I said, "You have me all wrong. I'm not a nature boy. I like fake reality. I like plunging into fantasy. I like amusement parks." And then, I still didn't know. Where did they start? I'd heard of pleasure gardens in England.
Mm-hmm.
I knew in Chicago, Riverview Park is just beloved. And although it closed in 1967, people still talk about it. Just as they do, every town seemed to have its own amusement park. Well, I did learn there were 2,000 at one point in America, and every town did have one. They were built by the railroad barons to keep the trolley cars running. They were called trolley parks, and you would ride to the end of the line, and that's where these electronic monstrosities, wonderlands really, were. People's homes were not wired for electricity. Then they'd go to these places. Not only was electricity running the rides, but would brilliantly light up the skies. So you can, just imagine the draw. And then they fell out of favor. People had their fill. What killed them at first was the Model T. Once everyone could afford his own car, you didn't need to go on a ride to get a thrill. You could provide your own behind the wheel. The other thing was the movies came in. And for a nickel, you could just enter another world and sit in the dark and make out.
Yeah. Well,
to combat that, just to take it one more step, and then we'll get back to conversing. The entrepreneurs who took over from the railroad barons, they thought, how are we going to attract a crowd? Well, that's what brought about the golden age of the roller coaster, because that was a supersized thrill that your Model T could not provide.
Right.
The Depression plunged the parks, killed off business. They sort of revived again during the war because it was a place soldiers on leave could take their dates. And then after the war, television came in and really killed them off because kids could see Howdy Doody and the Hopalong Cassidy and the Three Stooges on television. That was their amusement until Walt Disney figured, I'll use television for something clever. I'll sell my park, and my park will be different. It will be clean, and the world will come. And people laughed at him, and we know who had the last laugh.
It will be clean. It will not have prostitutes.
They'll be outside.
Yeah. Although some would say today that Disney, as a corporation, we won't go there. So,
speaking once we finish talking.
Yeah. So, speaking of roller coasters, obviously the first part of the book I found so fascinating because you go into the history of sort of royal indulgence in Europe and fairs and all of the antecedents to theme parks that were sort of from these monarchs who had all of these various eccentricities. And then there's Catherine the Great, who basically in the 18th century was the first person to basically create or to endow a roller coaster. Talk about that for a second.
Well, the Russians were always crazy about sledding, but they weren't satisfied just to take a hill. They would build on a wooden plank. And this included the peasants, whatever scraps of wood they could find. They would build these platforms that would slope, and then they'd toss water on them. In winter, they would freeze, and they would glide down what they called ice mountains, which came to be called Russian mountains. To this day, in every language but English, a roller coaster is called a Russian mountain. In Russia, it's called an American mountain, which is funny. Catherine the Great built this elaborate sledding course, but it was a roller coaster at all of her palaces, and her sleds were they weren't self-propelled. You were driven, so she would get a handsome cavalier, and she positioned herself in his lap and grab both legs and slide down the hill.
That's so
the French
funny.
saw this during the War of 1812, and they picked up on the notion, and they built these Russian mountains in France, particularly in Parisian pleasure gardens. And they were the ones who put wheels on the coasters, thus giving us roller coasters.
It's just a fascinating history. It really is. Talk for a moment, too, about George Washington Gale Ferris. The man for whom the famous Ferris wheel is named. Such an interesting figure. Would I be going overboard in saying that he is just as pivotal a figure in the history of theme parks as Disney, or even close?
Oh no! In terms of a particular ride, yes.
Okay.
But Disney, no. I would say George Tillieu with Steeplechase Park. As pivotal as Disney. I would say Solomon Bloom with the entire Chicago World's Fair Midway as pivotal. The two men who developed Luna Park in Coney Island, especially them.
Right.
Skip Dundee and Fred Thompson. They're on a par with Disney. I mean, nobody's really on a par with Disney, but
it just seems like everywhere you go, there's a Ferris wheel. It seems to be the single most ubiquitous.
This was the eccentric engineer who developed it, and it drove him to disaster, financial, personal, emotionally. He made the deal with the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, and they really cut him a raw deal. Whereas in Paris, the Eiffel Tower was the symbol of the Paris exhibition. So Chicago in 1893 afterwards wanted its own symbol. And there were suggestions made, even Eiffel submitted one. But Daniel Burnham, the chief architect of the fair, said to a group of architects in Chicago, what's wrong with you people? Why can't you come up with something? And Ferris, who was actually a mechanical engineer based in Pittsburgh, although his family was from the Midwest, his family was very prominent. His grandfather, was instrumental in the founding of the Underground Railroad. His uncle introduced popcorn to Queen Victoria, who then strung it. Anyway, Ferris was a well-educated engineer, and he just supposedly, when Burnham took the architects to task, he just sat down on his napkin at this lunch and drew this enormous wheel, which he could not sell to the fair. They said, "You're crazy. No one will ride it. It's too big. It's unsafe. You'll never find the parts." So he had to finance it himself. In the end, he had to sell off all his rights practically. And no one would ride it initially. First of all, it was late. He came up against all sorts of hurdles in constructing it. The fair opened, the wheel wasn't ready. Finally, the wheel opened. Nobody would ride it. But then a terrible storm hit Chicago, and the wheel didn't budge. And as a result, there was tremendous publicity about that, and the wheel caught on. And the wheel then became so profitable that even once the fair closed, the wheel kept spinning for another week. Ferris then got offers from all over the world. We'd like to buy your wheel and move it. He refused to sell. He insisted it stay in Chicago. He moved it to another park. Nobody rode it. He went broke. His wife left him. He no longer owned the rights. He ended up dying in a charity ward. He was 37. And the wheel, the city of Chicago ended up buying the wheel. And they then they sent it off to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, where it ran and made more money. And then after the fair closed, again, nobody wanted this original wheel, and it was dynamited.
It's just such an amazing story.
Sad story, yeah.
And there are
call it the Ferris wheel, even though he did sell the rights.
And there are sadly a lot of those stories here of people who had a dream and crashed and burned because of it, but we still are the beneficiaries of that dream today.
Exactly.
Which is
there was one more, if I'll
yes, no.
with this one. There was a fellow named Frederick Ingersoll, and he got the idea. Once Luna Park was a tremendous success in Coney Island, and all over the country, people, because of the success of Coney Island and its notorious reputation, all over the country, whether these parks were landlocked or not, they'd call themselves Coney Island. There's one in Cincinnati. Anyway, Frederick Ingersoll opened a franchise. All over the world, there were Luna Parks. And in fact, again, in many countries, an amusement park is called Luna Park. Well, and there's two that still exist in Melbourne and Sydney. But these were all over the world. In all the major capitals, there were Luna Parks, and in all the major towns in America. The one in Berlin did not close until the early 30s. Hitler did not feel amusement parks were necessary.
That's surprising.
He was a serious fellow. And but Ingersoll expanded too quickly. He went belly up. He committed suicide in one of his popcorn stands. He just shut the windows and turned on the gas.
You know, you have so many great sidebars in the book as well, and the one that jumped out at me because I love the ride anywhere I can find it is the sidebar on bumper cars, which is it's sort of a microcosm of what goes on with theme parks generally in the book, and these two fascinating figures, Adair and Stock, just shared a little bit. I mean, it's really quite a a battle, a format battle, like Apple versus Microsoft or DVD versus
or Betamax versus
Betamax versus VHS.
Right.
It really feels like one of those. It's fascinating, the lawsuits. Talk for just a moment about that.
Well, the technology was developed for the bumper car, which is basically still the same bumper car we know today, but there were two warring factions, and I mean, basically put, both sides stole from one another. And it was tied up in courts for years, but it did produce. There was a standing victor, whichever one it was, whose name escapes me at the moment. But it was a bumpy ride. What can I say?
It's so fascinating that so much about patents and copyright and trademark. There's so much of that going on here, and people stealing from each other and imitating each other. It's a wonderful, fascinating world. My last question: there's so much passion that drives these people. It never seemed to be, or at least with few exceptions, but it didn't seem to be, here's a great business opportunity, it's surefire lucrative. These are people who dreamed so big that it sometimes took a lifetime to convince others that they weren't crazy. What drove these people?
It was a craziness, but I think it was also just a love for escape. Look, reality's a bore, and that's being polite. Reality can just do you in.
Yeah.
And I think, for whatever reasons, in each individual case, and it was men and women. I mean, there was this wonderful pioneer in Denver, Mary Elich, and for her it was a necessity to, her husband got her into this business, and then he died after the first season because what he really wanted to do was be an actor, and he left her. Yeah. So she was stuck with these grounds and animals in the first zoo to be owned by a woman anywhere in the world. And, it's sort of, it's the hand you're dealt. Deal with it. And, it was sort of a fun notion. But it was also a different notion because they were carving out this new form of recreation. And it was they were artists in their way because this had not been done anywhere before. It had its roots in Europe, but with each new park that opened, there was some new facet being introduced, whether it was a new ride, whether it was a way of getting people to stand in line, whether, even P.T. Barnum even figured into the equation because what he did was sell tickets that allowed people for the first time ever to experience thrills in a group. So, I can't put my finger on what each of them had other than fortitude and persistence. And although there were schemers and dreamers, I say in my subtitle, it's the dreamers who came out ahead. Because the schemers, if you're out to cheat the public, you failed.
Yeah.
But in most cases, these people were not out to cheat the public. They were out to show the public a good time.
Well, it certainly has changed my perspective, and I will be going to Disneyland with my wife and daughter next week to check out Galaxy's Edge. But I guarantee you, after reading the book, I will not see any of those rides the same way. I'm seeing it all through a completely different prism now, and I thank you for that. There's a new appreciation. Stephen Silverman, the book is The Amusement Park, 900 Years of Thrills and Spills, and the Dreamers and Schemers Who Built Them. And I cannot recommend this highly enough to our listeners. Go to Amazon and grab it, The Amusement Park. It'll be the most enthralling read you will have all year, and it's a great read for the summer. Sit on the beach and read it, and you won't be able to tear yourself away. Stephen, thank you so much again for the book and for speaking with us.
Anytime, Wade, anytime.